Well, the Earth is believed to be 4.5 billion years old, as is the rest of the solar system. I happen to believe the Bible account of creation, which suggests very strongly the universe is far younger than that, thousands, not billions of years. And so might there be evidence out there, and I think there is. For instance, the moon and the Earth, there's an interesting interaction going on, a tidal interaction, which causes the Earth's rotation to slow down, and it causes the moon to spiral away. The two are happening together, and we can measure the current rate of that. And if we take that current rate and apply it to the past, and it's not a linear thing, you have to solve what we call a differential equations. It's the inverse power, sixth power of the distance. And we find out that as recently as 1.3 billion years ago, the Earth and the moon would have been in contact with one another. Obviously, that's not the case because people think the moon's been around as long as the Earth has been, which if it's 4.5 billion years old, can't be. Furthermore, the tides in the Earth about 1 billion years ago would have been a mile high. The British Isles would have been inundated twice a day by such tides. Obviously not a good thing, and there's no evidence that ever happened. No geologist would claim that. So I think this whole idea of the tidal interaction between the Earth and the moon suggests that the world is far less than billions of years, 1 billion years old even, let alone 4.5 billion. It's pretty clear, I think. You can't get out of that. In fact, there were articles written in science journals in the 60s and 70s about that very question. There have been people who tried to argue then that we're living at a time of high tidal interaction. We can't really model it carefully, so they simply say, well, they run computer models to try to suggest that it was much less in the past, the interaction was much less, and now it's pretty high, and maybe it'll be less in the future. Well, that's not science. I was in a discussion several years ago with several other astronomers over this question, and they threw this up to me. That's how we explain this. And I said, well, where's the data to support that? We need data in science, don't we? Where's the data? And they said, well, these computer simulations. And I looked at the four of them, and I thought, you don't get it, do you? Simulation's not data. It's just a simulation. And so I think good science would suggest that the world, the Earth and the moon, must be less than 1 billion years. Now, does it mean it's thousands of years? No, but it would seem to eliminate 4.5 billion years. Another evidence we have is the decay rate of the Earth's magnetic field. We have what we call a dipole field. We've been measuring it since 1830s. And at length of time, it's significantly decreased. We can measure that. It seems to be an exponential decay, which is what you would expect if it's generated by a current in the core of the Earth, the molten part of the Earth. So that's all consistent with what best theory we have about the origin of the magnetic field, what's causing the magnetic field. But, if you go back into the past, those currents had to be much stronger in order to do this. When you have stronger currents, you have more friction. And if you go back even 100,000 years ago, you find that the currents produced would have been enough friction to melt the Earth. So it's pretty clear, based upon what we know about the science today of what generates the magnetic field, that the world cannot even be 1 million years old, let alone billions of years old. And they have to hypothesize some sort of unknown mechanism. I'm serious. An unknown mechanism regenerates the magnetic field. It dies down, and it gets regenerated again and dies down repeatedly. And this is hardly science. You're going to appeal to an unknown mechanism. I see that increasingly in science, in astronomy, by the way, today. Some sort of unknown mechanism made these things happen. So I think there are many other evidences that would suggest, if we're attuned to these things and want to entertain these at all, that the Earth and the rest of the universe is much younger than generally thought. We have evidences in the solar system about youth and other things. The ring systems of the outer planets. Saturn's best known for its ring system, but the other large planets, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune, all have rings. And we've studied those a lot close up now with the Cassini division in recent years, but also some studies elsewhere. And they're very dynamic. They're changing. Particles are moving up and down, in and out of those rings. And we've identified several mechanisms that erode away the rings. And now we've come to the conclusion that rings are very transitory. They don't last very long, probably 1 million years, and they're gone. So why do we have ring systems in the solar system? Well, the theory is that some satellite or some other object got pulled close to the planet, was shredded by the tidal interaction. But how many satellites did they have to start with to do that? And why did it all happen in the time period of 4.5 billion years? We happen to be around at this point. I think that's really kind of improbable at that point. We've looked at the surfaces of various objects in the solar system. In the summer of 2015, we got the first photographs from the surface of Pluto. Shocked everybody. because they were expecting to be heavily cratered. They thought it had been cratered for 4.5 billion years. By the way, the part of the solar system Pluto is in is heavily got a lot of bodies you can impact with. And yet they found very few craters. There are a few, but not many, which suggested perhaps the surface was very young, like a few thousand years old, possibly, or they've suggested some sort of reworking of the surface. There are three ways you can do that: tidal interaction, internal heat source, or through some sort of internal heat source from radioactive decay or primordial heat. Primordial heat would have decayed out a long time ago. There's not enough density to account for radioactive sources, and there's nothing nearby that could produce the tidal. There's no way that we know of, that you could generate a new surface on Pluto, but yet there it is. I think it's our Creator perhaps just with a twinkle in his eye saying, try to explain that. Well, you can't in billions of years, but you can certainly in thousands of years, a biblical timeline. Again, the evolutionists are well aware of this problem, and they're scrambling, even as I'm speaking to you, to try to come up with explanations. And I'm sure they'll come up with something. But remember, when something has no natural explanation, if you're committed to naturalism, you have to make one up, no matter how illogical or how improbable it is. And only that can be true, because the supernatural one, of course, it can't be true, because your mind is closed to that possibility. Well, I believe the world is probably about 6,000 years old. I come from a biblical standpoint. I think the chronology of the Old Testament would seem to suggest that. You could add a few centuries here and there, but not much. And I don't apologize for that. I think I'm standing on firm ground with this.